welcome back to Map the Maze. So September is different. For a lot of people, I guess it's back to school. And suddenly I am feeling nostalgic about the excitement that I used to feel of being able to go and do crazy stationery shopping and go back to school with that. So I thought I would do something different for September. So this month, I'm going to talk about mindset. What are 4 mindsets that I think are helpful to people who are working through mediation, about to enter into mediation, or even maybe have completed their mediation, but are now trying to make their mediated agreements work. And there are 4 that I want to share with you. One is curiosity, hope, patience, forgiveness. I'm going to talk each week about one of those particular mindsets and why I think they're particularly helpful to people who are experiencing, working through, implementing mediation or mediated agreements. And this week I wanted to start with what I call conflict curious. It's a little bit of a strange term, and I'm not sure if anyone else has come up with it, but let me tell you a little bit about my story. So up until I went to do my master's and went off to Pepperdine, I think I knew probably less than the average person about how to resolve conflict or how to manage myself in conflict, or even what conflict was really about, what was going on, even for myself. So for me, going to Pepperdine was eye-opening and life-changing in more ways than one, that it really changed the way that I think about conflict and myself in it and how I manage it. And one of the big changes, beyond maybe even learning skills, was becoming curious, becoming conflict curious. So one of the things that happens when you study mediation often is that they ask you to reflect on conflicts that you've had and experienced. And I have to say, when I got to Pepperdine, I was armed with thousands of conflicts that I'd experienced, particularly at work. And then over the year, and since then, when I try and reflect on conflict that I have now, it's really hard. The reason, I think, is that Pepperdine made me conflict curious. And what that means is when I'm in a situation where maybe I really don't agree with what's going on or what the other person is doing, rather than giving myself over to how I feel about it, there is a significant portion of my brain that is now working on, ooh, what's going on here? Why is this happening? Why am I being triggered? What have they said that's really impacting me? Why do I want to react like that? What might be going on for them? What part of maybe their identity has been impacted by this? Or what could be the underlying reasons for this behavior? What exactly is the... There are a myriad of questions. And the reason that that helps is that it slows me down. So I'm not reacting to what's happening because I don't have the energy. I'm too focused on trying to analyze it. And from my perspective, that's really helped. That instead of feeling that I'm reactive, kind of like an amoeba where I'm poked and now I have to respond to my stimuli, I feel as if I have space. I have the ability to pause and to really think about how I want to respond. What is it that I want to do? And really importantly, I think, what is it that I need to try and achieve? What is this potential conflict going to lead to? What is the hurdle that's being put in my way? What is it that's sitting on the other side of this that I need to get to? And if I can understand what that is, then I can really think about, well, what's really going to get me there fastest and with the least amount of stress and pain. And so for me, that's really important, is just thinking, slowing down, thinking, reconnecting with what my goals are, what it is I really want to try and achieve, and then actually strategizing as to how do I do that? What is the best way to do that? So in the moment, it can feel really satisfying to snap back at somebody, to react to the provocation. Absolutely. I mean, we have all been there when someone has provoked you and you just think, bam, let me just go right back. The problem is, long term, it doesn't always work. I would also say for certain types of dispute, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you end up feeling worse, that you then kind of reproach yourself for not having been able to manage it better, or it actually potentially impacts negatively something that you are trying to achieve. So from my perspective, that slowing down, that giving you time to think about what's my goal, what is it that I really want to achieve here with this person? And how do I maximize the chances that I can achieve those goals? How do I make it the most constructive interaction I can, even if they're being an idiot? How do you not be an idiot? How do you kind of keep your head in the game? And I think, we've talked a little bit about Stuart Diamond's approach, which is getting more. So in his book, he really talks about you have to be so clear about what your goals are. And I think, when people go into a big negotiation, that's easy, that we can easily think, well, these are the three things that I really have to achieve in this. And here are three things I'd like to achieve, but they're kind of a preference. But in everyday life, it can be hard. And so when I'm working with people in mediation, I talk to people about their goals, their priorities. I think for some people, it's quite easy to access that, and they maybe have already thought about it. And for other people I work with, I think it's really hard that they struggle with the idea of, I might have a goal or a priority or an objective. That maybe sounds something that's kind of like, oh, well, if I had a project, I'd be doing that, but this is my life. And I think it's really helpful to do that reflection and think, what is it I really want to achieve? And then use being conflict curious, conflict curiosity as a way to achieve that. So what does curiosity really mean? What we're talking about is the desire to know, the desire to understand. And I think, again, that's really hard for people to sometimes think about when they're in a conflict or if they're in a mediation situation. That I think without doubt, there are people I've worked with in mediation who watch me listening, watch me asking questions, watch me trying to understand what the other person is saying and think, oh, she agrees with them. And the reality is I don't agree with anybody who's speaking in mediation, unless they're saying something like, I will go get a cup of tea. But really what I'm trying to do is understand. That's actually my job, is understanding, trying to understand, modeling how do we understand each other. And so from my perspective, that exercise, understanding, is very distinct from what I think people connect it with, which is agreeing. So being curious doesn't mean that you agree with what is being said or the information you're getting, and it doesn't mean that you accept it. It just means you understand it. So one of the ways that I see this happen a lot is that people will start trying to put a proposal on the table. And before there is a chance to actually understand what the proposal means, is clarify some of the details, people will just say, no, it's a no. I'm rejecting it because it's not, I haven't heard the words that I need you to say straight away, so it's a no. And in mediation, one of the things that we really do is work on slowing that down so that, and it can, I think, feel a bit frustrating for people, but we will say, okay, any questions, just to clarify, not to respond, not to accept or reject, just to understand what the proposal is. And if they don't have questions, often the mediator will have questions, because what we're trying to do is give people the opportunity to actually process what is the proposal that's being put on the table. So from my perspective, curiosity is a really valuable tool, that it's not about agreeing with people and it's not about accepting, which is what I think sometimes people feel. If I seem to be curious about what they're saying, they'll think I agree with them. And that's absolutely not what I see in mediation. That from my perspective, curiosity is about trying to give yourself more information, trying to give yourself better options. So what are some of the benefits? One of the benefits, obviously, is that you do get more information. So the more curious you are, potentially the more questions you're going to ask, the more clarifications you'll get, the better you will listen. And I know that I've spoken about listening before, but it's a really underrated skill. And often when we're hearing somebody that we're in conflict with say things, we're so busy getting ready to respond, we don't really listen to what they're saying. And I've seen that many times in mediation, where the sort of the forest got lost for the trees, and that people were so focused on the fact that they are in diametrically opposed to the other person, that they didn't actually listen to the words that were coming out of the mouth, which actually could have been helpful. So I think that slowing down, that understanding, is incredibly valuable. The other thing is that there's also a lot of research that being curious, being open to learning, being open to knowing more is a way to increase positive emotions, to decrease anxiety. And you can see how that would be helpful in a negotiation, in a mediation setting, or in implementing. your mediated agreements, that there can be, when people are experiencing separation and divorce, a real dearth of positive emotions, and there can be a lot of anxiety. So anything you can do to help yourself to be more positive, to feel less anxiety, is something that you need to consider. What else? This is a really good one. Less likely to be subject to confirmation bias. So I know that I've talked in other podcasts, maybe not recently, about confirmation bias, about the sort of the mental shortcuts that we as humans with brains, human brains, use to live life and to manage things. And one of the ones that we see in mediation time and again is confirmation bias. What that means is that we have an opinion and a belief, and that when we hear new information, anything that supports that belief, we accept, and anything that challenges that belief, we either minimize or we dismiss. And we all do it. So I'm not saying this is you, I'm just saying this is us. This is who humans are. I don't know if dogs do it, probably not. And so one of the challenges is that in conflict situations, people are really subject to cognitive biases. The reason is because our defenses are up. We feel like we're under attack. Often we are under attack. Our limbic systems are kind of working overtime to keep us feeling safe, which means that a lot of the system two, the cognitive functions, the prefrontal cortex, go offline because we're going to rely on these shortcuts, because they're efficient, because they will focus on keeping us alive and safe. They're not great for problem solving, though. That's the problem. So if you can stay curious, it just means that when a new piece of information comes in, rather than accepting it because it agrees with what you think, or rejecting it because it doesn't agree with what you think, you'll actually analyze it. You'll think about it. You'll try and think, how is this useful to me? How can I use this to advance my goals? Or how does this piece of information get me closer to achieving what I want? So from my perspective, I think that's maybe even the most valuable part, is that it helps people to debias. Also, there is research to suggest that people who are curious are better at coming up with creative options, that I guess it's because you are more open to seeing different parts of the process, to seeing different pieces of the puzzle, that there is an increased ability to come up with creative solutions. It tends to make people less aggressive in terms of provocations, and provocations happen in mediation all the time. And it does help to make people increase his ability to communicate openly, which of course, from my perspective, is really important. So conflict curious, be my word of the week, 2 words of the week, is something that I would really encourage. That if you are trying to negotiate with somebody, if you're in a conflict, if you're faced with a really difficult workplace maybe, or you are in a mediation, think about, how do I change myself? How do I start becoming conflict curious? From my perspective, the easiest way to do that is just more reflection, is taking some time, even in the heat of the moment. And actually, that can be the easiest way to start reducing conflict, or at least reduce the heat of the conflict, because your reactions will slow down. Now you'll be able to make a response. Anyway, something to think about. So first mindset, conflict curious. Next week, I'm going to be talking to you about hope, another really important mindset for mediation, and one where I think there is some controversy. So speak to you next week. Take care and have a good week.